Hello, everyone, and welcome to WriterSpeak, dedicated to the written word and those who produce it. I am your host, Jeane Slone, the author of 3 historical fictions, She Flew Bombers, She Built Ships, and She Was an American Spy During World War II. I am also a distributor of local books in local Sonoma County stores. In the studio today, I'm very happy to introduce Arlene Balin, author of Born Stateless, A Young Man's Story, 1923 to 1957, and her second novel, With Intent to Murder, an Inspector Max Hamilton mystery. Welcome to WriterSpeak, Arlene.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's nice to be able to interview you today.
Thank you.
And the authors, we have many authors that watch our show.
Good.
So they'll be happy to hear various tips that you can give the authors about writing. Arlene Rubens Balin was born in San Francisco and attended San Francisco College for Women, a liberal arts college now, part of the University of San Francisco. She married at 21, moved to the peninsula, and reared 6 children. She was widowed after 36 years and returned to her school to get her degree at San Jose University. In 1996, Arlene married an old friend, Carnivele, and moved back to the city of her birth. She has written all of her adult life, but her first published work was Con's memoir, and her second, With Intent to Murder. She resides with her husband in Sonoma, California, traveling the world with Con, and entertaining family and friends, weekly bridge, doing volunteer work, reading, writing, and thinking are how she spends her life. And let me tell you, I thoroughly enjoyed her book, Born Stateless. To me, it almost read fictional. It is so hard to believe Con's real story, but it is a true story, and it is a great page turner. I was wondering, why did you write this book? I know you had a reason.
Well, if you knew my husband, you would know that at every cocktail party, he has a slight accent, but it's not a Russian accent, it's just an accent. So people say, I detect an accent, and then he will tell them the story of his life, especially his young life. His father was a captain in the Russian army for the Tsar and was in the last campaign. And after the war was horribly ended in Siberia, he and his wife escaped into Manchuria. They had to go separate ways. And he had graduated from high school and was going to, he was born in China, excuse me, he was born in Harbin. Then they went to Japan, the family went to Japan, and Con was reared in Japan, going to Catholic schools, missionary, actually the teachers were American missionaries, and he graduated from high school in 1941. He went to Shanghai to wait for his visa to come to study in the United States. Of course, it didn't come. And Con was able to visit his family in Japan a couple of times during the summer, and then he was trapped in Shanghai during the war. And I would say half of the book is about that torturous time. And that part was not told at cocktail parties. Mm-hmm. But the stories, the short stories of his friends and his what he did as a child, and being on the stage and all of these things were part of his cocktail party patter. But he told me other stories. And I said, and people used to say to him, you should write a book, Con. You should write a book. And I said, you should have to write a book, write a book. And he said, no. And so I said, well, let me write it. Let me write your book. So it took, believe it or not, 4 years to write this book, because he was used to telling these stories, and to go deeper was difficult. There were some terrible, terrible times. And it made me understand not only my husband, but the torturous times that soldiers now have coming back from Iraq or Afghanistan or Vietnam. You never get over that. And when you see people from World War II, they still cry after all those years when they're asked questions on the History Channel. So it's a book. The book, I wrote the book because it's a very, believe it or not, American story. It's a story of survival. It's a story of never giving up, of tremendous courage, I think, or foolishness, I don't know, and unbelievable luck. The man has been lucky all of his life, and one of the things, he married me. That was really good. But he also beats me all the time in Scrabble and every game that we ever play, so he's very lucky. But the stories are absolutely true. And I finally found out a way that I could write the stories. First we taped them, it didn't work, nothing worked. So I said, just tell me a story. I got a legal pad, tell me a story. I don't care where you start. And so he'd tell me stories, and then I would write the story as a separate chapter. I'd write each one as a separate chapter, and then he would read it, and almost always he'd say, how did you know that? I said, well, I know you. You know, because you have to interpret conversations. So a story is very boring, I think, especially memoirs are very boring if you say, and then I wrote, and then I did this, and then I did that, and this date, and all that. It has to be a story like your life is. It's really a journey. And so that's what this is about. I was very fortunate also to meet a lot of the characters in Con's book. Not his mother and father, but a lot of the people that he went to school with. So I was very fortunate.
No wonder, because it is, in so many ways, it's hard to believe.
Yes, it is totally true.
But there, of course, are parts that are true, and you do believe it's true.
Yeah.
I found it really sad that his parents got to go to America.
Oh, yeah.
And he didn't get to go.
No, it was terrible. That was
because he was born stateless.
That's right, but it didn't matter.
And that's what makes
it's where you were born. It's where you were born. His parents were born in Russia.
That's what makes it a good title. And he was supposedly Russian, and he wasn't even born in Russia.
No. But the reason he couldn't get into the United States, not because he was Russian. If he had been born in Russia, there would no problem at all. He was born in China, and there was a Chinese quota.
Yeah.
And so it didn't matter, and he was not a Chinese citizen. But it's a very, it's a very funny, the world is funny about immigration, as we're finding out.
Yes.
So it took him a very long time, and it was only by a fluke, as I say in the book, that he was able to apply, and then almost didn't make it at the end. I mean, I cried when he told me that story. It's if he hadn't turned around, I'm not going to give away the book, but if he had not turned around and said to the immigration officer when he was going out the door and said, my parents were refugees, I'm a refugee. And when the man called him back, I mean, it was just pretty amazing. In the beginning of the book, of course, he becomes an American citizen, but he didn't know that when he was living this life.
Well, I think everybody assumes that when you're reading it, but it seems that he's never going to get there.
No. I mean, everything, when I say good luck, I mean, it wasn't good luck to get tuberculosis when his number came up. I mean, that was really awful.
Yeah.
So, but he was very successful in business, and he saw such history. I mean, that's one of the. I'm a history major in college, and I love history. I love looking at the History Channel. I did a tremendous amount of research for Con's book also, and because I wanted to find out what happened to these people, which I did. It was amazing, and I did a lot of research for the English mystery book set in 1938. So that part was really fun, but. Historically speaking, if you're interested in history at all, you will learn a lot about. My friends have said, and people that have read the book said, I didn't know that. Oh, I didn't know that, Arlene.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of things.
You learn a lot.
Yeah, from a personal point of view. Another thing is that I love about his story, and this is another reason. you read and you hear about certain times in history, and you hear it from a point of view. And this book, because Kan was in Japan, speaking Japanese like a Japanese person. I mean, he speaks Japanese to people, and they go like this.
Yeah.
I've been in travel with him, and it's shocking. They do double takes. They'll walk by or sitting like that. It's unbelievable.
That's the one funny, funny part I liked in the book is he got away with a lot of things because a Japanese soldier would question him, and he'd immediately start speaking Japanese.
With some humor, too.
Yeah.
He challenged soldiers and everything, and he got away with it.
And it helped him.
Of course. Of course it helped him. I mean, he's that way now. He's a very charming man. So, that's the way it's not all luck. It's your gift in life,
Your personality.
Yeah, exactly right.
I'd love, I think the audience would really love to hear a passage from the book.
Now that I explained his first part of his life, I'm going to read a little bit. He, as I say, he went to missionary schools and by the time he was in the second grade, he was trilingual. So it always makes me laugh about English as a second language, considering he only spoke Japanese and Russian and went to an American school. And in the second grade, he was speaking English perfectly. So it's interesting.
Which turned out to be helpful.
Oh, I guess, in his life. Yes. So I'm going to start the reading. I'm just going to read about a page and a half. When he graduates from high school, and this is in June of 1941. Things were not, the idea that the surprise attack on Pearl Harbor. Yes, it was a surprise, but the Japanese were very similar to the Germans. They had already built up a huge military, and there was talk, rumors that something was going to happen, but nobody knew when, nobody knew how. Mm-hmm. So Kan being stateless, he had applied for a visa to go to the United States, as I said before, to study at a university. And he was a good student, and he had to go, ships were not necessarily going from Japan, and I'll start right here. On graduation day in June 1941, wearing my navy blue blazer and white flannel trousers, I received my high school diploma. I had done well, and my parents were proud of me as I was awarded special honors. The visa had not yet arrived. My father's friend assured me that it would be coming any time. In July of that year, a large Japanese ocean liner filled with passengers left Yokohama, bound for the United States, only to turn around midway in the Pacific and return to Japan. Not a good omen. Was this a permanent situation? Would no more ships sail from Japan to the U.S., or was this a temporary restriction? There were many ships still sailing freely across the Pacific from other ports outside of Japan, like Shanghai, Manila, and Singapore. My father, after some thought, decided to take me to Shanghai, where upon receipt of my visa, I could sail for the United States. Actually, the only place I could catch a boat was in Shanghai. Being stateless, I would need a visa to enter any other location. Shanghai was a free port and international city, so there was no problem for me to go there. So in late August, my father and I boarded the Tarusuta Maru, is that correct? One of the larger liners in Yokohama, headed for Shanghai. The whole trip took 4 days. We first sailed to Kobe, about 300 miles south of Tokyo. We docked for a day and a half, taking on many foreigners who were happy to be leaving Japan. The mood on the ship among those passengers was one of giddy relief. They did not know how lucky they were. The only stateroom available to us accommodated 4 people. It had upper and lower bunks on each side of the stateroom. Our cabin mates were 2 American men. One man always stayed in the cabin while the other left for meals and such. The one that stayed had a large locked canvas bag attached to his wrist. I saw them exchange this bag and lock it to the other man's wrist as they took turns leaving the stateroom. My father told me they were probably diplomatic couriers. These fellows spoke very little to us, as they were obviously not on a pleasure cruise. It was pretty exciting stuff for an 18-year-old kid with an active imagination who had seen a lot of American movies. The trip from Kobe to Shanghai took a couple of days. I was fascinated on the ship, with everything on the ship, the number of passengers, the dining rooms, the decks, the sound of the sea, all of it. My favorite place was on the deck, where I spent a lot of time. On one of the days I was leaning on the deck railing, I thought I saw something in the near distance moving in the water. As I watched, a huge fish, a shark I found out later, came by the side of the ship where garbage was being tossed, grabbed something and bolted away. The big fish did this several times. It was quite a scene and made me think of what would happen if a person were to fall into the same water. The sharks were not only swimming in the sea, they were on land as well. The powerful military leaders of Japan were planning what turned out to be a disaster for their country and for the rest of the world. So it goes on from here, where he lands in Japan, Shanghai, and lives with White Russian royalty, speaking French at dinner. I mean, it was, it's a wonderful. I love the story of the Baron and Baroness, and how she served the dinner, cooked the dinner, and then left the room with her apron off.
Because everything changed for her.
Yes.
Yeah. And this is so very interesting. Can you tell us, how did Born Stateless end up as a Russian book? It looks so lovely.
Yeah, I know, it's a wonderful book.
Yeah.
Khan's cousin, I think second cousin, lives in Ukraine, and he read the book, and he had some contacts, and he said, my friend is a publisher and wants to publish the book in Russian. So we gave them permission to, who knows? I mean, we don't know how many sold, but it was published, and they did a beautiful job of publishing it. So,
well, I'm glad they gave you one.
And they gave us like 3. So,
oh.
Yeah, yeah. So I think they're for sale, but now everything's such a mess over there that I don't know. We'll never see any rubles. Let's put it that way. But it's a wonderful one. Actually, I like the cover much better than ours. So this is how Mr. Balin looked when he was young. He was handsome.
Yeah, it's interesting that it's a different cover, and it's
the
nice.
pictures are all the same, but he just did different things with it. So
well, let's talk about your second book, which is so very different.
Yes, very different.
Are you a fan of mysteries?
Yes, I adore mysteries.
Well, that's how that came about.
So, and because I love history, and World War II, I was a child during World War II, and it was in San Francisco, and it was, it really was an important part of my life. I know that sounds ridiculous, but I think I came from an unusual family. My father was Jewish and my mother was Irish Catholic, and so I was very aware of what would have happened to me if I was in Germany, and or any place else in Europe.
Yeah.
And it's really funny because I've traveled to Germany since then, and nobody knew about it. Of course, nobody knew anything about the camps. It's very funny, around my dinner table we knew about the camps when I was a very small child. So it's very strange. Anyway, so because of that time, and most of the great English mysteries, even on television, are in that time. It was their, as they say, finest hour. And
I just love BBC.
Yeah, I mean, it's so fabulous. And so the story, they're so well written, and they're just so,
like they're the best.
Yeah, and they're so right on with the costumes, and they're very. I love clothes, and they're absolutely authentic in hair and makeup and clothes and all of that. So because I read so many, and because I thought, I'm just gonna try to do this. I'm gonna write. I've written other things. I've written fiction before, but I was too busy, and I never did anything with it.
I
Anyway.
was wondering, I was going to ask you, why did you set it in England? And you just answered that question.
Yeah, because it's I mean, okay, Joan Didion said once about how she writes, do you outline the whole book? And so you know from start to finish what each chapter is going to be. And she just started to laugh. She was on Charlie Rose, and she started to laugh and said, why would I write a book? Why would I write a book where I know the answer? I mean, the end. I don't, And so I think that's what appeals to me about mysteries, because they unfold in my head, and I don't know who the murderer is almost halfway through the book.
Yeah.
And I've tried to frame it, and it just doesn't work at all. It does not work at all for me. So I thought I'm just going to do it. This book, the original first draft, was twice as big as this book. And I decided, I took a class in San Francisco, wonderful class, and writers. And the teacher said, one of the things I remembered, she said, do me a favor. She said to the class, do me a favor, don't bore me. And so I cut everything out of this book that did not further the story. So I want you to turn the page. I want you to wonder who, there's 4 or 5 characters in it that could have committed the
I
murder.
noticed there's quite a few characters.
And I had a lot
book.
more than that.
Yeah, wow.
But one of them, some of them are in my next book. So because I love the characters, and I love the way they looked, and so they're in the next book.
That's handy to show.
Oh yeah, never throw anything away.
I've done that with my books.
Yeah.
I like cut a part out, and then I kind of save it.
You have to save it. I was told that by a writing teacher, don't ever throw anything away. So, so I love writing the book, and I love this book. I love this book. I love Con's book. And when I read it, I was trying to think, what am I going to read today? I was trying to think. And I thought, God, this is really good, Arlene. This doesn't, it sounds like I'm conceited. It doesn't. It's almost like the words, and you're a writer. Do the words just come out? I mean, the words, you don't plan it just happens.
That's what I find. Like sometimes I'll be writing and I'll go, I really think I need somebody else in here.
Yeah.
And then another character comes up.
And they speak. Isn't that true? When you tell people that, they don't, it's all in your imagination or in your
imagination.
But it's part of you, but it's not really. It's like a separate.
And it's good for us to tell, a lot of authors watch this program.
Yeah.
And it's good to tell other authors about this, because I find when you're stumped, which is in a way a better word than blocked.
Yeah.
I find if I go and ride my bicycle, it will come to me, because I'll go over it and over it while I'm writing. But if I sit in the place where I'm always writing, it won't appear.
No. And I think, at least for me, when I try too hard, that is a huge mistake. Sometimes the juices are just not flowing. So as you say, get up.
Yeah.
Get up. And then read over, like if you write in the morning, read it over in the afternoon. And I do so much thinking during the day and I might not write for 3 or 4 days. And I know all of a sudden at night something will come to me, and a whole scene will come, and I can't wait to get to the computer and start writing, because I know this is what's wrong. It wasn't right. It wasn't right. Or if you try to force a character into something, it's not right. That character won't do it. And it sounds fake, and it's not good.
That's why I've always been told, always keep a pad and pencil by your bed.
Yeah. Great writers do that.
And dreaming also.
Yes.
It's really handy when you are feeling blocked.
Yeah.
That you dream and it comes out. It gets figured out.
I'll say one more thing about Con's book. I had a wonderful, I don't know what my time is.
I
had a wonderful
a while longer.
Editor. Lived in Berkeley. I never met her, if you can believe it. I met her. It was all online.
Yeah,
and,
I can
she was
believe
recommended,
that.
and she's a writer herself, and I was very fortunate in that she accepted me. In fact, she asked me to go to her workshop. But anyway, my favorite writing in the book was the prologue. The first thing I wrote in this book was the prologue, and I loved it. I thought it was just wonderful writing. I finished the book. And she said, she said, Arlene, the prologue has to go. I said, what? And I never argued with her once. I said, the prologue has to go. She said, yes, it doesn't fit the book at all. She said, what you have to do now is you have to write a foreword in your hand, and from you, not from Con.
Oh,
the foreword is from you. And at night, one night, I'm laying. After she told me it was a couple of days, and I thought, oh, God, I don't know what to write, blah, blah. And the foreword of this book came to me, and I used the analogy, or whatever you want to call it, what is the word, metaphor, of an old house. And the Con was like an old house where you go in, and there's sheets over everything, and dust, and then the sheets were pulled off in a lot of the rooms. Some of the rooms were kept closed, kept locked, and never would be opened. But a lot of the stories came out at this house. So I sent it to her, and she said, perfect. Ready to go, Arlene.
She sounds like a great editor.
Well, she's not doing it anymore. Damn it. Yeah.
I have a really good editor, and it is very hard to find good editors.
Yeah.
I've been through 4. And a good editor will easily tell you what they don't like, but they'll also tell you what they like.
Yes.
Because being totally critical just really
that's not a good editor.
hinders your writing.
Don't, if you read the first draft to somebody, or you send some things to an editor where you take will you edit my book, and they don't like it, they shouldn't take it. If they think you're a good writer, if it's going to be worthwhile for them to do it, then they're going to take it, and they're not going to criticize you unnecessarily.
Yeah.
And they also will recognize your own style. Isn't that true? So it might not be their style, but
it's a tricky line.
And that's why this book and Con's book is not the same. Writing, you write true stories. Right? Very different than writing a novel.
Yeah, well, for you to go from and the word isn't even memoir, there must be a word.
It's a biography.
Yeah.
It's a biography, not an autobiography. But it's really...
To a mystery. That's so interesting.
But when you think of how similar they are in certain ways. First place, the time frame is almost exactly the same. And the idea of terrible things happening and finding the answers and, a happy ending, works out as far as I'm concerned. It was easier to write a true story because you're sure of it.
But you did tell me you did a lot of research.
Oh, yeah, a lot of research.
So,
yeah, a lot of research.
Just because it's true, it doesn't mean
no,
it's
that
easy.
part you have to do. And some fiction doesn't require any research. You can just tell a story. In fact, when I went to New York to the Edgar Awards, I went to a symposium, and they would say, the authors would say, the idea that you have to live in a place. They said to me, did you live in London, Arlene? I said, no. Did you live in? I said, no. They said, well, how did you write this book? Because, the old saw that you have to write what you know.
Right.
Wrong.
But have you been to London, though?
Of course.
Oh, okay. But that really does help.
If you watch a lot of English
movies...
movies...
you thought about London while you were writing, and the movies, course. Exactly.
You know how certain people speak, and I did research on accents also. And my editor said, don't write the book in with an English accent because it's too tiring for people to read. Just slightly, like I say, instead of you, they say yeah, yeah.
Oh.
So let me read just one little bit, okay?
Okay, that would
Do I
be
have enough
nice.
time?
Yeah.
Okay. The news of the murder of Squire Hempstead spread throughout St. Basil like dry autumn leaves swirling in the wind, falling on streets and doorways all around the village. The George was the most popular meeting place for the residents of the village. Harry Morgan's family had been the proprietors of the pub and inn for 4 generations. Men enjoyed a pint or two after work while discussing the news of the day, and women met for lunch or tea. Rumors of a possible war with Germany now took a back seat to the murder of Squire Cyril Hempstead. As the men sat at the oak bar, they drank their ale and shook their heads as they told their tales of the squire, well known for his love of Irish whiskey and his quick temper when he had too much of it. He was an odd duck, was he not? Hardly speaking at all until he put down a couple, then you couldn't shut the man up. He was educated and well-traveled, I'll give him that. I don't think he ever got over his wife leaving him. His mother was no peach. I always thought it was her that caused the wife to leave. His daughter may have been some consolation, but it's not the same, as we all know. Aye, he was a man of letters, but where did it get him? He was a lonely man, that's what I think. A lonely man's, old Tom added as he sucked on his pipe. He probably left the daughter a pretty penny, don't you think? She'd make a man a fine wife if he didn't have to look at her, Brian McDonald said with a chuckle. She's not so bad looking, popped up Robbie Pitts. She's just a bit plain, that's all, not the type to paint her face. I bet she'd be kind of good looking if she fixed herself up. Well now, Mr. Pitts, are you getting some fancy idea to make a call on the grieving Miss Heloise Hempstead? I'll wager there'll be a queue a mile long to comfort her, said Brian, joining in the laughter of all sitting near. I'm not going to read because I'm going out of time.
That was wonderful vernacular. Isn't that what you'd call it?
Yes,
vernacular?
Yeah, and they sit there and talk and talk.
And it brings you right.
The end of this chapter is when you find out that there is a scandal with his wife, and his wife is gone, and the murdered man. So,
well, I have this on my
whatever
will be my next book to be reading. And tell me, what are you working on? Another novel right now?
Yes. This same one. This is another Max Hamilton mystery.
Oh, good.
But this time, he meets a man from London, a lawyer that helped solve this problem, the solicitor for the family. And they become friends, and he says, what are you doing in this small, because Max Hamilton is educated at Oxford, and he is from London, from a good family, and his wife's died, and he was in this town, was her birthplace. So anyway, but the solicitor says, Cameron Philby is his name, and he says, come to London, I've got a huge flat, and come to London and stay with me and get out of this small village. You don't belong here anymore. And so he thinks about it, and he was in World War I, and he's had also depressions and sad things, and he's alone. He has no children. So he decides to go over, and he goes to London, and he is asked to go undercover by the head of MI6.
Okay, better not tell anymore.
That's what the book's about. And there's a murder involved.
So what is the title of your book?
The working title is The Shimmering Face of Evil.
Oh, great.
And it means that everything on the outside is beautiful. Everything is, everybody is so happy at cocktail parties and doing well everywhere.
And where can we buy these 2 books?
Book Passage. Any place that sells books will order it.
Oh, good. Thank you, Arlene, for joining us on WriterSpeak.
Thank you for inviting me.
WriterSpeak is produced at the C Media Lab in Santa Rosa. We would like to thank our sponsor, the Sonoma County Gazette. Please join us next time for another exciting interview with a talented author.